I thought maybe we should start with AI, particularly because you repped India at Bletchley, and there are a lot of different angles to that: regulation, corporate opportunities, safety and security. Give us a little bit of a sense of what happened at Bletchley, India's position, and where also you think the global debate on that is going.
So, no, I think it was certainly a very useful summit for us as India, and indeed the 28 countries that attended. There has been a lot of buzz around AI, especially after ChatGPT, and there have been many different views thrown around in terms of the future of AI and the risks of AI, and there have been many academic, intellectual conversations about that. But for 28 governments to sit down and over the 3 days talk about AI, even though through the prism of safety, was, I think, an important milestone, because this is certainly what India has been saying since 2021, which is that as we move forward and there are these new, more powerful technologies, emerging technologies that are going to come at us, and as we certainly look at innovation and certainly look at expanding innovation and the digital economy using those technologies, that's a conversation about guardrails is as equally important. And we've talked about, for the last 2.5 years, about safety and trust as one of the most important guardrails in tech. And so it was in some sense satisfying to see that Bletchley was the dominant conversations in Bletchley were about safety and trust about AI, and how do we create safety and trust, and so on and so forth. Of course, I am concerned, as most of us should be concerned, that governments, when they react, they tend to overreact. And certainly in the final session, I made it clear that India's position is not to overly obsess and demonize AI and look at this only through the prism of safety and trust. We consider AI as the biggest, most significant invention in our times. We consider AI to be a kinetic enabler of the digital economy and the innovation economy. And we certainly believe that there is a case to be made to harness AI, to make AI deliver its potential, but at the same time building these really easily understandable, easily regulatable guardrails of safety and trust and accountability. So I had to say that in the end, because I felt that the conversation was going a little bit over the top and focusing only on safety and risks. And I think this is important as we now step into the GPay summit in Delhi on the 12th, 13th and 14th, which is the Global Partnership of AI, which India is chairing, and then Korea Safety Summit sometime in May 2024, that during these next 6 months that the countries and governments of the world align to what ought to be a common protocol or a common framework for AI in terms of guardrails. So I'm hopeful, because there was certainly a lot of enthusiasm and knowledge, real knowledge and real enthusiasm about AI at Bletchley.
Do you feel like the international alignment has the opportunity to get beyond abstract principles and start to dig in a little bit on regulatory coordination, harmonization, or do you feel like the best we can hope for is?
No, Evan, I think we have to. The history of tech tells us that the last 10 to 20, 15 years, 2 decades, innovation has escaped regulation because they have pretended to be innovation, or they've essentially masqueraded as only good. And we have seen in the last decade that while the internet and tech does represent good and empowerment, there is also a proliferation of harm and criminality that has accompanied it. And so governments around the world have lagged innovation. And I think there is, and I'll make this case really just as my view, that governments are now stepping up and understanding that if you don't come together today, because the internet is ubiquitous, there are no geographical boundaries, and local legislation cannot certainly deal with harms that are cross-border, that countries will have to figure out a way of to collaborate, cooperate, and create a global framework for this. And that there is no island of success to the exclusion of others. And I think this realization, and I'm hopeful that this realization is real. It is not just a soundbite, it's not just for an event, and it's just not momentary and episodic. I got out of that Bletchley Park summit that there was some real seriousness on parts of many governments, especially like-minded governments, to really create some understanding where innovation can thrive, but at the same time people are protected from its harms.
I'm really struck by the way you juxtapose the word opportunity alongside AI. Because sitting in the United States or in Europe, we hear so much about safety and security and about risks and risk mitigation. And so to flip it to the other side of the binary, which is opportunity, really reflects, I think, the question a lot of people have about how India is going to build out. So can I get you to pull that thread a little bit and talk about the next phase of India's AI build out? What's the strategy? What's the regulatory side of that? And how is government conceiving of a national AI mission, for example?
So for us, AI we are almost all into AI. We are very committed to AI. We have a program that we are launching, which will be the first global summit for a program called the India AI, just like we did for semiconductors. And we are really creating all of the enabling requirements: AI compute, AI chips, funding of startups, large language models in real life use cases of healthcare, agriculture, security, language translation. So our focus is really not necessarily to get the big bragging points or to get the headlines that or compete with Sam Altman or OpenAI or win the next Nobel Prize. We certainly are focused on using AI in real life use cases, and our Prime Minister is absolutely a believer that technology can transform lives of people, make governments deliver more, deliver faster, deliver better. And so AI is going to be, for us, used to build models and build capabilities that are aimed at real life use cases. Healthcare, for example, is something that we are building deep capabilities in. We think 1.2 billion Indians, as diverse as they are, as diverse as their geographies are and their circumstances are, require very, very different types of healthcare and wellness responses from the northeast to the south to the north to the west. And so AI will play a big role for us in terms of how we look at healthcare for the next decade, how we look at agriculture for the next decade, how we look at education and skilling for the next decade, how we look at security, how we look at inclusion through language translation. So we are focused on real life use cases that will impact communities, impact real people, rather than, like I said, compete with Elon Musk or Sam Altman.
You mentioned compute and it's advancing so quickly. Is that a constraint here, or is that something
Of course, it is a constraint. It's a constraint all over the world, which is why NVIDIA is $1 trillion company today. It is a constraint, and we certainly haven't got built up the capabilities to train large models, multi-parameter models. So we are certainly in the process of doing a very comprehensive strategy to create real capacity, real GPU capacity, both in the public sector and in the private sector. So you will hear in January that we are really serious about building some pretty significant capabilities.
And on the regulatory side, is there something distinctive that's happening here? I mean, everybody's talking about AI regulation now around the world.
Yeah.
Are there models globally that align with where India is heading, or is there something unique and distinctive?
Evan, ever since I was given this job by our Prime Minister, I've looked at models and I've read every book there is to read on regulating tech. And frankly, there is a vacuum. And I think as a country that has got now 850 million Indians online and will have 1.2 billion Indians using the internet by 25-26, we are certainly the largest block on the global internet. We have decided that if there is no model, let's build a model of regulation and then evangelize and advocate it. And that's certainly what we are doing. From 2021, we have talked about openness of the internet and openness of tech. That is no exclusion, no market disruption. As one principle that we are focused on, guardrails of safety and trust. And really for the first time, moving away from this abstract concept of self-regulation and diffuse responsibility for safety and trust to making it legally accountable safety and trust on platforms. So we are moving significantly ahead. You know that there is a minor version of AI's challenges that we today deal with in terms of social media and the general toxicity on the internet. We are dealing with that misinformation, deep fakes, in a manner which is consistent with these three guardrails and these three principles. We think legal accountability in law for platforms that are on the internet, which is a big departure from the safe harbor concept of Section 230 and Section 79 in the Indian Act, is the way of the future. That there cannot be a case that any platform makes, AI or non-AI, that the cyberspace is a place where laws will not reach and accountability does not exist. We think harms are committed in cyberspace by AI platforms or any other platforms, criminality exists, and that those who are responsible for aiding, abetting, enabling, that should be accountable under the law.
So you think India has the ambition to develop models that actually can be exported and scaled in other parts of the world?
I think so. I think we
As
have
with
no
financial
option.
inclusion, data.
Yeah. I think we have no option because there is none that exists. There's nothing that exists. And I would point you to a book by Anu Bradford called Digital Empires that talk about, you see, the US model is so not applicable to countries like India where you have the First Amendment, right? We have, right to free speech, but we have reasonable restrictions under 19.2. So therefore, there is no model that you can just borrow. Neither the European model works, neither the American model works. And I think both of them are not working either for the US or Europe. And I think we are, in a sense, trying to show the world that there is a mix, there's a hybrid of the US model of let the market regulate it and let the markets decide, to the European model of let citizen rights be the principal way of regulating platforms, to something that balances innovation as well as protects the legitimate right of every citizen to have the internet be a safe and trusted space for them. So, to answer your question, yes.
Okay. Can I switch gears a little bit and turn to semiconductors? I've spent a lot of my career around Taiwan, around China. I hear about semiconductors all the time. India's had a national semiconductor mission and a strategy, I think, at least since 2021, so actually among industrialized economies.
Yeah.
You're pretty early. There's a subsidy regime, 10 billion in federal subsidies at least.
Yes.
Give us a sense of how that's going and also the scope of the build out here.
So we are the India Semiconductor Mission, which is, as you said, $10 billion of funding from our Prime Minister, is about 3 years old. 2 years old, really, not 3 years old. It started in January 2022. And the ambitions that policy or that mission lays out is that we want to be in manufacturing, which is the holy grail of semiconductor. But as importantly as manufacturing, we consider packaging and packaging innovation a huge area for us to create capabilities for the next decade. Design, we are firmly of the belief that existing legacy chip families, whether they are x86, whether they are ARM, are going to be replaced with much more functional AI optimized kinds of devices going into the future. So there's a whole new market emerging, as NVIDIA has very, very emphatically shown, for devices that will power products and platforms in the AI world. And in terms of talent. And so we are looking at this whole spectrum of research, talent, design, packaging, and fabrication. In the last 2 years, I'm happy to report that we're almost playing catch up for 70 years of neglecting semiconductors. So we really didn't do anything very much in the country as semiconductors. And in the last 2 years, we have played very rapid catch up. So we have a very vibrant design ecosystem now that is creating IP and devices in India. We already have, as you know, every major semiconductor brand, every major semiconductor company has very large R&D centers in India. We have the first big manufacturing unit, which is the Micron $3 billion packaging unit that's coming up in Gujarat. We hope very soon to announce a legacy node fab and modernization of our semiconductor complex in Mohali. So we will have, in my opinion, legacy node fabrication capabilities, not the cutting edge, not the 2 nanometer, not the 5 nanometer. And we certainly don't want to compete with Ohio or Taipei or Taiwan on that area. And I don't think it's an area that we want to get into in the first 5 years of the next decade. And very akin to Albany Nanotech and MIT Microelectronics Lab, we are building a India Semiconductor Research Center, which will be hopefully, if the vision is actualized, will be one of the big centers for semiconductor research for the next decade. So we put these pieces together. We are making these steps. It's not difficult. It's not easy to get the investments in fabrication as fast as you would like to, because it's so competitive all of a sudden. And there is a real shortage. Even if there is availability of capital and intent to invest, there is a real global shortage of talent for fabs. I know that Maurice Chang has said that his ambitions in US are being thwarted or slowed down because of the lack of industry-ready talent. So we are focused very quickly off the bat. We have moved to create a program within our higher education system that will create 85,000 engineers, postdoctoral, doctoral, masters in material science, chemistry, physics, engineering, in all the intersections between the science and engineering that are required for the next gen fab. So you will see that program has already started to get implemented, and we hopefully will play a role as India or Indians in terms of the talent pool that will power the fabs and the packaging units in the coming decade. That is our ambition.
And that's on the skilling side of your portfolio.
Yes, exactly right.
And you feel like the pieces are being put in place to
Absolutely.
skill the kind of workforce.
Yeah, we did a smart thing, if I may say so myself, by getting the industry to redesign the curriculum. So instead of the government doing it or people within the government doing it, we got the industry, the AMDs, the Glofos, the big fab companies to actually redesign the curriculum from postdoc, PhDs, masters to undergrad and certification programs. And that is getting implemented. That's already in the pipeline now.
If you do you mentioned competition. So if you do a competitiveness stack and you look at, what's happening, let's put Taiwan to the side. Arizona, Japan, Korea, Europe. The Indian niche that you're trying to build towards is where?
I think so first of all, look, I think we would be a $110, $120 billion market for semiconductors as
domestically
in India. No, the demand for semiconductors, because on one hand, the electronics manufacturing industry is also growing leaps and bounds. So, A, we are a market. B, we are a geopolitically, a geography that is, and I'll use these words carefully, that is certainly not Taiwan, that is not Korea, and is not very close to a country that we all realized is not really reliable and trusted. So we have geopolitical advantages, market demand, and in areas of design, research, and talent, our ambition is certainly to be out there competing with the best in the world. Now, in the fab and the packaging part, in packaging, again, we think because of the way packaging innovation is evolving, and that, again, there is so much of headroom for innovation in packaging, that is, again, an area that I think India can be, if not amongst the leaders, at least in the lead table of that. On fabs, look, we'll play the long game. We will have the legacy node capabilities that will service automotive, industrial, and maybe in these cutting-edge compute areas where TSMC, Intel, Glofo, Samsung are the leaders. That is not an area that we will necessarily get into in a hurry because of just, where that technology is and the risk and yield and supply chain that needs to be in place before you can support that kind of cutting-edge technology. So we see, in large part us playing a big role in the innovation of the semiconductor space, in the actual science and engineering space in the fabs. We will have a presence. We will create the capabilities around legacy nodes. And I mean legacy as in not 180 nanometers. I'm talking about 28 nanometer, 40 nanometer. And address segments of the market that are digitizing fast, automotive, industrial, wireless, and telecom. And allow the big boys to play in the compute and the mobile devices space.
The balance between attracting foreign firms and indigenization to build up Indian competitor, how is that?
We don't see this as a binary at all. We don't see this as having to choose between a foreign company or an Indian company. We encourage foreign investments. Micron is a clearly American company. We encourage joint ventures. We encourage fully owned companies. And Micron is a classic example where usually the narrative is that you need an Indian partner because you need somebody to navigate the lay of the land. That's the conventional wisdom. And for Micron, the partner is the government of India and the government of Gujarat. So you really don't need that type of partnership anymore. You need partnerships where people bring complementary amounts of capital, pools of capital, or complementary skills. And so we are completely supportive and encouraging of partnerships or indeed 100% owned investments.
Can I ask you to talk a little bit about the legal architecture that's emerging here? We've heard a lot about the data protection and all that, but there's also the Digital India Act. There are other bills that are pending. Talk about how these things fit together to create a legal architecture.
First of all, I must tell you that this is a well thought of architecture that is being rolled out. So there's nothing that is ad hoc. We are not solving one problem without looking at the other problem. The framework that our Prime Minister has mandated for us to build is a framework that will enable the $1 trillion digital economy goal that we've given ourselves. And that addresses electronics manufacturing, it addresses innovation, it addresses startups, AI and all of that. The existing piece that we have is called the IT Act, which is, for those who don't know, is a 22-year-old legislation. Doesn't have the word internet in it, so therefore I think there's a consensus that it can be safely superseded and replaced. The successor act to that is something called the Digital India Act, which is a work in progress. We have the draft ready, and while a lot of work has gone into it, I suspect that before the next elections we will not be able to legislate it, because one of the things that the Prime Minister insists on is that we need every digital legislation to be extensively consulted on. So therefore, I don't think we have enough time to get that done. The second piece of that has been the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is already enacted and is law, which is, again, I think, in a world that excessively celebrated the GDPR, this is, again, like I said, the same contrast. This balances the need to have innovation be growing unimpeded, as well as protecting consumer rights and fundamental rights to privacy. I think it does it very well, and from all the feedback I have gotten, people are happy with it. The rules that go into that Digital Personal Data Protection Bill will be out for consultation later this month. They are ready, and we will notify those rules probably by end of this month or early next month.
The overarching theme of this summit is geopolitics and tech. So if you take that issue and you extend it globally, do you worry about the implications of fragmentation around legal architectures, data localization, different rules that are emerging? You mentioned GDPR, so there's a European way, there's an American way, there's a Korean way, the emerging Indian way. Do we have a harmonization problem, or is fragmentation not something that can
I think there are two things here that are, in a sense, working in opposite directions. One is post-COVID. I think every country, every community has looked at sovereignty, looked at self-reliance through a newly awakened perspective. I think COVID certainly woke up everybody to this whole issue of supply chain resilience and innovation resilience and trusted geographies, trusted supply chains. So I think that certainly is playing into countries instinctively saying we need to do this and we need to have our own sovereign capabilities whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in digital DPI or data or any of that. Then there is this whole other trend, which is that unless, because of the proliferation of the internet and the rapid growth and expansion of digitization, that unless countries come together and figure out a way to lay some common guardrails, the bad actors who sit in one geography, perpetrate a crime in a second geography, and the victim is in a third geography, certainly will have a field day. So these are these two trends that are, in a sense, opposing trends. But I feel, especially after Bletchley and the more recent US government responses, that countries are beginning to believe that there is no such thing as my sovereign digital space, and that is in some sense exclusionary of others. That you may have your capabilities, you may have your core strengths and IP and all of that, but at the end of the day, there has to be some cooperative framework for even you to be successful and you to be safe and you to grow. So that realization, I would hope, is more urgent and more rapid, and it has higher velocity than what we've seen the last 10 years, which is we have a lot of academic conversations, including harebrained ideas of the United Nations controlling the internet and so on and so forth. So I think, look, I mean, for us, the digital economy is going to be 20% of our GDP by 25-26. We are at 11% today. We were at 4% in 2014. So the underlying internet, all of these emerging technologies is not just academic. It's not just about innovation. It's about real value addition to the economy, real jobs, real income, real wealth being created. And so therefore, this is no longer an issue of let's just have a little chat about AI and where it'll go, and then, toss a few buzzwords and say, I use ChatGPT, and then walk away from that. I think this is a lot more serious, this conversation about the future of the digital economy, the future of the global digital economy, future of the framework that will regulate this global digital economy in a manner that it is safe and trusted. At the same time, it's growing and expanding, is a conversation that all countries will certainly need to have.
I see the clock ticking down, and I want to ask you, maybe it's a little bit of a cheeky question, but I know you're very unique because you were a tech entrepreneur at one point in your career, and now you're working as a Minister of State, dealing in a government bureaucracy. I was in government myself. It can be difficult to navigate that. How are you finding that? The culture, the bureaucratic culture, the institution?
Yeah, this is a question I'm asked often, and it's not like I just popped up from entrepreneurship and joined politics. This is my 18th year in public life. I think I've worked very hard to get where I am, both as an entrepreneur and as a minister. So, look, it's different strokes for different folks. I think in bureaucracy, there is a lot of general knowledge. When you're talking about specific, deep dive requirements of experience and expertise, what I encourage our government, especially my team members in my ministry, to do is to engage more and more with those who have the ideas and those who have the knowledge, so that it's not just bookish knowledge or something that you just picked up as a buzzword. So, look, we deal with very smart young entrepreneurs every day, and they have a tendency to keep us very honest and grounded, because they are not, today the average 28-year-old Indian doesn't want to deal with a minister or a bureaucrat that is giving them, hot air and rhetoric. They want specific answers, specific policy responses to specific challenges that they face. So we live in a very different world. I think there's no option but for everybody in government to be deeply knowledgeable, to deeply understand the problems and challenges that they are trying to, or indeed the opportunity that they're trying to legislate for or create a policy for. There's simply no other option.
And on the flip side, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and corporate people in the audience. Your advice to them about how to interface with government, not just your ministry, but bureaucracy.
No, I think, look, there used to be a time when I was an entrepreneur that dealing with the government was one of those shaking, scary, sweat-inducing sort of experiences. I don't think you need to do that anymore. Startups are, dealt with a lot of respect. This is a government that enables success. We are heavily invested in the success of, young startups. And the Prime Minister said on Independence Day off of Red Fort in 22, he said the next decade is something that he calls the India Techade. And he also said that the architects and the builders of that India Techade will be startups of India. So this is how important this is the important role that we see for startups in India, which is that they will be defining, shaping, building the next stage of India's growth, and certainly, short of rolling out the red carpet, we'll do everything for them.